Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Project Octane, the series where we turn this imaginary car into a reality. That's a terrible catchline. Before we talk about the car though, I think it's important that we welcome everyone new to the channel, the Discord, the GoFundMe. Our Reddit post this past Sunday was a huge success, and I just really wanted to thank you all for all the support moving forward. God knows how, but one of you mad lads, also decided to give us a $5,000 donation, and that was completely unexpected, but is greatly appreciated. And I'm still waiting for someone's credit card company to reach out to me and say it was a mistake. But hopefully that's not the case, and we can start putting that money to good use here real soon. Back to the car. Today we're going to be talking about the shocks. Now, obviously, we already have the parts, and I think most of you all have seen our models up to this point, so you know that they've already been reverse engineered, and they're everywhere we need them to be. The reason why we need to talk a little bit more about them today is because a couple weeks ago, back when we did our chassis video, one of the things that we sort of skipped over was how we were actually going to mount them to the frame. So that's our goal for today. So starting out, I think the easiest thing to do is to take a look at some of the inspiration we have from the vehicles that these actually came off of. You can see from this image that the shock normally mounts to this sort of sheet metal body style bracket that connects back to the main frame rail underneath. But for manufacturing purposes, rather than trying to replicate this exactly, we started out by first having a flat plate and then using a large diameter steel tube that already connects to the top of the frame, but then extends downwards and connects to the next lowest chassis tube. I'm sure you can tell already though that this gets pretty long pretty quickly and kind of looks a little funky. So we're going to take a look back at our inspiration for another minute and notice that our control arm bolts are also mounted through the shock mount here. Originally, I was just kind of planning on leaving our upper control arms alone. They were just going to be a single shear through these hoops on the frame. But by tying the shock mount into these, it can make our lives a lot easier. So we'll start by, rather than using a nut on the back side of the control arm, we're going to use a threaded bushing of sorts, a threaded insert that we're then going to connect across the inside of the control arm through the shock mount with this small 1-inch diameter tube with a heavier wall thickness. We can then take our custom shock mount tube and cut a pair of matching holes through the center for the small tube to pass through, and then trim away some of the extra material hanging around. Doing a quick check with the bodywork, one of the things we noticed was that it was actually protruding from the outer surface of the car, which was definitely not ideal. But luckily, we can actually trim this off without affecting anything. We could have also accomplished this by using a slightly smaller tube for our shock mount, but there was only so many options available to us, and because we wanted to use the same tube size for both the front and the rear, sort of tied our hands a little bit, but luckily doesn't negatively impact us really in any way. But speaking of the rear, we're going to repeat the process for the front back there as well. Lucky for us, it just so happens that the rear is packaged a little bit neater with the tubes that are already there, and it's sort of the simpler look. It's not nearly as complicated, but it's the same thing. We don't have to make any trims for the bodywork, but we do plan on eventually tying the top of this back in with one of the game details that you see on the actual Octane body, but that's something further down the road. Now, one of the things you might have noticed too was how the heck are we going to install the shock with this small cross tube running completely through the center? There's an obvious interference there as well. The obvious answer is that we'll cut it. But before doing that, it's important to look at how we're going to jig up everything in order to weld it. So in order to do that, we designed what we call solid shocks. They're just dummy shocks to be used for manufacturing and alignment purposes. Pretty simple design here. It's just a regular square tube with a bushing in the bottom end and some alignment holes at the top. We also have these cutouts here so that they will interface with the cross tube to lock everything in place. And just like that, we're kind of done for the week. Not a whole lot of actual parts, but a lot of problem solving to actually get everything to be packaged as neatly and securely as we can within the bounds of the bodywork. Next week, we're going to look at some more small parts that we're having custom made by one of our friends. And while I think that'll also be a short episode, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that I'm trying to get some footage for and put together here for y'all in a couple of weeks when we have something bigger to talk about. But until then, thanks for watching. Really appreciate your help as always, and we'll see you next week.